Thank you for joining us here at the Eddie Network Podcast. I'm Ed Breniger, your host, and we've come to the end of our 10-part series of conversations that I had with people back in 2023. My guest today is Anthony Howard. I met Anthony many years ago in Vienna at a conference there, a leadership conference, and we hit it off automatically. I mean, it was like, okay, it's like we've known each other forever. And he is a fantastic man. He's had a stellar career and he keeps on growing. He keeps on changing. He keeps going venturing into new areas. And you're going to hear about that today. I am so glad to present to you my conversation with Anthony Howard of Australia. Thank you for watching. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network Podcast. My guest today is a return guest, friend Anthony Howard from Australia. He's a remarkable man doing remarkable work. And you can find our original conversation as episode 2 of the Eddie Network Podcast. And here we are. I think you're going to be episode 90 something. So it's pretty exciting. Thank you for being here. So, what have you been up to, Anthony?
It's been an interesting year. You're following the Confucian idea of, to be born in interesting times.
Yes.
I'm not sure when it was that we spoke, but it was probably last year.
It was September or October, somewhere in there.
Okay, so it's just over 12 months. I've spent the last 2 years post-pandemic traveling the world, researching leadership trends, so on and so forth. But perhaps the biggest thing of this year that really shook my world up was one of my sons died in January, tragically and unexpectedly. That was a really interesting time. And we're not going to run a whole session on grief. That would be a whole different conversation. But I raise it because it's obviously very central to who I am in my life and what I'm doing. And Joseph, the son that died, was perhaps my closest friend. Mm-hmm. And he was 34 years old, and he lived, coincidentally, had an apartment in the same building that I have an apartment in Sydney. So whenever I was in Sydney, we would frequently run into one another, cross paths. I'd see him in the lift, and I'd send a note saying, "Joseph, I'm going to be in town. Do we want to have breakfast?" And but Joseph was a train driver. But the reason he was a train driver is he liked thinking. So he was a philosopher at heart, and he loved the idea of being able to finish work and come home, and his apartment was full of books, and not as big a collection as mine because I'm a bit older. But the point I'm making here is that Joseph was my go-to for questioning about philosophy or theology or whatever. So if I was stuck grappling with something, I'd say, "Joseph, how to explain this to me?" And he'd rattle off and he'd start with Plato and he'd go through all the, right now I understand. And so he loved my work. And so after he died, I really had to confront the question, does my life have meaning or purpose? Like, what do I do now? Do I just retire? And, why do I keep going? And the kind of realization that I had was my purpose didn't change. The reason that I'm on this planet didn't change because one of my sons died. And if anything, it became more focused. So I discerned over 20 years ago that my purpose, the reason I'm on this planet, is to be the artisan of a new humanity. And since then, I've spent those 20 years writing on being human, human-centered leadership, researching what it means to be human, did a PhD on humanity and leadership. It's just been this driving force. And I realized that my high leverage point in that purpose was to work with leaders. And so that if I could help this person become a more human person, more human leader, build a more human organization. We together would build a more human world. And Joseph shared that dream with me. And so we were, even though we didn't work together, we were kind of colleagues in the dream. And I realized that the purpose hadn't changed, and that the purpose now is, it's a legacy to Joseph. It's a legacy to my son, to say this is a work that he wanted to see succeed. And so he's very much present with me through today. And so feel free to interrupt,
Well,
because
so you have a purpose, and there's a mission to that purpose, and you now have a dedication to that purpose and mission based on your love and honoring of your son.
Absolutely.
Love that.
It's really quite profound. I miss him dearly, but sense his presence very much. Just after we spoke last year, September, October, or around that time, I was grappling with that question of mission. So you make a distinction there between purpose and mission. And so I've lived out this purpose very intentionally, very consciously for 20 years about being the artisan of a new humanity. But I mentioned about this post-pandemic research, and clients asked me, what does leadership look like in a post-pandemic world? And as I began to travel the world, talk to leaders, do some reading, do some research, it became evident to me that was the wrong question, that the pandemic was one among a number of events, but it was not it was front of mind for us because we'd just come out of the pandemic. But the pandemic was one among a number of crises across the environment, the economy, geopolitics, armed conflict, food and water supplies. We have this cascade of post-prevention crises that I hypothesize emerging into a meta crisis. And this is where the conversation I was starting to have with Joseph, what is this meta crisis? And what I was discovering was that people were talking about being exhausted. And I realized that it wasn't us. We were experiencing exhaustion as a manifestation of the meta crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And our systems were exhausted, our people were exhausted, our institutions are exhausted. There's no shortage of exhaustion kind of stories. And so that led me to do some research into the rise and fall of civilizations over the last 3,000 years, look at what causes and creates major shifts, look at the hypothesis that, we're in something of a dark ages. There's a whole science out there now called collapsology, conferences on collapsology and the theory of collapse of society at the moment. There's a lot of fear about, if it's not collapse, it's conflict. But what I discovered, to my great excitement, was that these moments in history can presage a new renaissance. These moments can occur before the flower blooms, so to speak. And what I realized is we could actually cause that to happen, or at least contribute to it. We could say, what are the factors that create a renaissance? Can we be a part of that? And so my mission, very intentionally, shifting from understanding purpose to be the artisan of a new humanity, I grasped that my mission in the next decade is to help humanity cross that abyss from the darkness that we inhabit, get beyond collapse and chaos and conflict into a new renaissance, into a new time of flourishing of art, architecture, literature, philosophy, music, politics. The world is not doomed. There's a lot of hope.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot of good work.
I totally agree with you. I hesitate to say this, but I am more optimistic today than I have been in quite some time. And I've looked at the whole collapsology thing. I even spent a half a day with I'm blanking on his name. He's one of the leaders of that movement.
Right.
It'll come to me in a minute. and I've listened to them, and I've looked at what they're saying, and I'm come to the conclusion that it's not a comprehensive collapse. It is a very selective collapse, and it collapses at the point where the institutions or the social structures have failed to adapt to a much more diverse, much more decentralized world.
Well, there's a number of factors at play, and different systems are collapsing in different ways. And I don't subscribe to the fullness of the theory around collapsology, but I'm fascinated by it having emerged.
Yes.
But I do agree with a lot of the research, as in a lot of things that are happening in the world point to the possibility of collapse. And it would be unwise to reject that or deny that. I don't think that means we all, become preppers, but if we see it in the context of thousands of years of history across the West and the East, this isn't just a Western argument. These big changes, these seismic shifts indicate possibility and potential.
Yeah.
I don't just say disaster's coming. Disaster may come, and we may need to be prepared for it, but disaster may not come if we look at what's happening in the world today and say, how can we respond to that in a different way? If we respond to it in the way that we always have, we will continue to get the same results. We've all heard that quote. But there's a sufficient number of people out there, I believe, looking at this differently and trying to create more human movements, more caring movements, more loving movements. All those things coalesce in a way that we don't fully understand and drive the possibility of change.
What I see, and I've been seeing this for quite some time, is a split. There's a split between the people who we recognize as the elite, the powerful in society, and the average people. And that split is that the people at the top see the collapse coming, and they're actually promoting it. They're behind it. I mean, there are no accidents happening. Everything's intentional, and the people that cause these things are saying, well, we can fix this. They're never admitting that they have caused it, but they say they can fix it, but they can't fix it because it just leads in kind of a vicious circle back into. But if you talk to the people who are kind of the middle managers on down, they have a different view of things, and they're very skeptical of their leaders. And this came to me in visiting one of the largest companies in the U.S. I was doing some seminar work with them, and it came to me in meeting an executive assistant to one of the senior VPs of the company in that division of the company, and I realized, and this is shortening this story, but I told her that I don't think that your company is defined by its leadership or the tragedies that they create. I see that your company is defined by a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people. And when I said that to her, her formality was very off-putting. She just kind of melted down into her seat, and it was like someone is recognizing what we all recognize, which is that we love this company. We're making this company work, and no one ever sees that. And I think that ability for those relationships to happen is the platform or the foundation for the new humanity that you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting that you point to relationships and values. The key to fostering a new renaissance, the kind of world that we want to create, is a turn to value. Mm-hmm. And I'm using the term value in a very intentional sense to refer to values such as truth and beauty and goodness. Mm-hmm. And beauty very, very specifically, because we could have a whole session and a whole lifetime arguing about truth. And the more people get involved, the more difficult it is to kind of come to an agreement on that conversation. And of course, because we can't agree on a shared sense of reality, we don't have a shared sense of morality.
Yeah.
If you and I can't agree what is true, well, it's impossible for us to agree what is right. However, no matter where we stand on truth and goodness, if we stand looking at a sunrise or a sunset, or stand underneath the stars in Wyoming at night out in the fields, no one goes, well, that's ugly.
No, that's true.
Everybody is moved. Now, they might be moved in different ways, but beauty moves people.
Right.
And it's not because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it's because beauty is in being itself.
Right.
And beauty calls us from being. Beauty calls us from the sunrise. And when beauty calls us, it calls us out of ourselves and enables us to change our mental models and our worldviews. It enables us to think differently. And so when you have an experience of beauty with yourself and with a team, the challenges that you're facing, you suddenly view in an entirely different way.
I've been a lover of architecture since I was in college. My first semester in the university, I took a course in cathedrals and castles of Europe, and
Right.
it was great.
How fascinating!
Great, and so I see this, and I think this picks up on some of the things that Ian McGilchrist is talking about, and I've been reading an architect, a Finnish architect named let me get his name is Juhani, Juhani Pallasmaa, Pallasmaa. And I'm been reading this little book that he wrote called The Eyes of the Skin, Architecture and the Senses. And he is at the very beginning of this book, he's nailing this point that the eyes are not the chief senses that we have. It's our skin, it's the touch. And he speaks about how the screen creates a very shallow sense of the world, and that we need to be embodied, which is the sort of thing that Ian McGilchrist is talking about, this embodied sense, which creates an intuitive sense of what the world is like. But we need to engage with all of the body, our whole body, in seeking to discover what is beautiful.
Absolutely, and the embodiment point is really critical. I'm pleased that you raised that, because we can look at photos of the Parthenon or videos or see movies. We can look at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. We can look at these great works of architecture, the Sydney Opera House. But when you are present in those things, when you stand in the concert hall, or when you stand in the Parthenon on the Acropolis Hill, when you just have a sense of vastness.
Yes.
You have a sense of placeness where I sit relative to everything else. It draws you beyond yourself. Right. And certainly the digital world we inhabit, it obviously facilitates the kind of conversation we're having now, me in Australia and you in the US. But the profound difference between that and you and I sitting down and having a coffee together and being able to shake hands and feel the touch of one another, the difference is profound. And I believe that the kind of thing we're searching for in the world today is that human touch and
I agree.
Beauty and that experience, because those things transform us and help us to see one another as human and help us to see that we can actually work together to create the kind of world that matters.
That a reference point for me is something that I saw when my former wife and I went to Italy back in the 90s, and we were in Florence, and we were we're just walking the streets of Florence, and we're near the Duomo, and such a beautiful place. but it's not just the architecture and the layout of the streets. It was the fact that there were these beautiful Italian Florence Florentian citizens that were walking the streets, and they were dressed very impeccably, and the women were walking arm in arm, and the men were walking arm in arm, and they were doing this in the late part of the day. They may have had a coffee or a drink, and they were doing this before they would go to dinner.
Mm.
And it came back to me years later when where we lived, there was a family that, and they would take in exchange students, and they had an exchange student from Florence who came stay with them for 6 months, and she was wanting to go out after dinner and go walk the streets, and they said, well, we don't really have a place like that, so they went to the mall. They went to the shopping mall to go do that, and I just thought, oh, we're so impoverished in the way we view the world and the beauty of the. So yeah, I think it's really important, and I think that people are. I think the portal to discovering what you're talking about is actually becoming directly engaged with experience. Get out of your house, close down the computer, go walk somewhere, get in your car and go up on a mountaintop somewhere, go to the beach, walk on the beach, get sand in your feet, get wet, have all this engagement with reality, the reality of nature, the reality of people. And I think then that changes how we view, and we know that it changes how the brain functions, but it changes how we view people. And
that's absolutely correct. And your earlier observation there about McGilchrist, his wonderful research into the left and the right hemispheres and how they do the same thing, but they do it differently. And his observation that the left hemisphere is this binary yes/no operator that we use almost exclusively in business because we to operate, whereas the right hemisphere is this hemisphere that's very comfortable in uncertainty and curiosity and wonder and the mysterious. And if we can liberate that in some way, then it enables us to release our intuition and dream and come up with new ideas and new visions. And then we can feed them across the left hemisphere and say, play with this and tell me what you think. But I recall probably in reading McGilchrist and making that observation, therefore, how crucial it was that I spent time in nature or in architecture or in art galleries, or that I spent time freeing up that right hemisphere, getting comfortable in wonder and uncertainty and the beautiful. And that was an actual part of my work. And so I gave myself permission. It sounds peculiar even having to say this. I gave myself permission that as a part of my work, I would go for a walk. And that I wouldn't feel guilty about not sitting at my desk if it was, for like 10 a.m. in the morning. I would go for a walk and I would sit under a tree. I would just gaze at the seascape or wherever I happened to be. And I had these moments of real conflict. Oh, and I should be at my desk. I should be doing something at my desk. And how extraordinary that we all know we do great thinking work when we get away from our desk and we untether ourselves from these machines and we sit under a tree. I went for a walk yesterday because I go for a walk regularly now. I went for a walk yesterday and I'm on this path walking along, and away in the path is kind of winding away through the distance and with a line of trees along each side of the path, really beautiful. And away in the distance, I can see an object or a form sitting at the base of a tree. And as I get nearer and nearer, I can see it's a young man, and he's leaning up against the tree with his legs drawn up, reading a book, old school, reading a physical book.
Yeah.
But I was just so struck by this idea. He was out in nature, taking the time to read and to be. And I think that, well, I don't think that. I know that. I've spent, as I've said, I regularly travel the world, but travel for me is not being a tourist. It's engaging in the culture and engaging in the place, and it's sitting in the art galleries, it's sitting on the beach, it's sitting in the space, encountering whatever is there,
Yeah.
offering itself to me through beauty in particular, whether it's beauty in people, beauty in the architecture, beauty in nature, whatever it might be. There's beauty everywhere, and that beauty is transformative. And I would argue that the pursuit of beauty in particular this year has helped me live with grief, and that it's helped me integrate. If that's quite another year or two, I might have thought about this more so, but I think it's helped me live with and integrate grief into my life
Mm-hmm.
as a human emotion by immersion in beauty.
I would suggest that integration is really how we learn to value the people that we know. And it's just not an emptiness, but there's something that emerges in our remembrance of people that we love, we've lost, and that allows us to see a bigger picture of the world, because their legacy, their impact upon us remains with us. I was this morning talking about my grandparents with a friend here, and I was really moved by remembering how they were together, husband and wife, and as my grandparents, and thinking how significant their effect upon me has been, and how I, in many respects, I am living out what their expectation for me was, or still is. So where have you been on this journey of the last year? Because I know every time I see something you've written, you're in some faraway place. You're not in Australia, and you're having this wonderful venture of exploring the world.
I am. So Copenhagen, Oslo, Bergen, up the Norwegian fjords, Hamburg, London, New York, Rome. They're the ones that come to mind.
Yeah.
Immediately. But I've got to say also, just the complete aside, but last week I took the week off and spent a week riding motorbikes with 50 or 60 of my friends, riding motorbikes through this part of the world. So it's just a wide variety of fun things that I'm able to do.
That sounds marvelous. I mean, I've had in the back of my mind that I want to come to Australia, and I want to circumnavigate the entire island.
Come on down, Ed. Come on down.
It may take a couple of months to do that, but I mean, what else am I going to do? I mean, I can do podcasting from wherever I am,
and you'll meet some interesting folks that you could interview, and you'll be able to gaze on some spectacular scenery and nature. But going back to your question, yes, the travels have really taken me to some very, very interesting places and very intentionally sought out. So, for example, when I was in Copenhagen, this was a coincidence. I stayed in an Airbnb in Copenhagen, and to my delight, discovered that the apartment that I had was in a tiny square with, those lovely little squares. You got a beautiful tree in the middle of the square. And you got restaurants around the side that service the local people who live in these apartments. Very, very old building. Well, across the square was the apartment Kierkegaard used to live in.
oh yeah.
And I'm a great fan of Kierkegaard, and I thought, well, how extraordinary. So Kierkegaard was known as the walking philosopher. He would walk around Copenhagen just thinking. He was a tall guy with a top hat, apparently, and so people would see this walking philosopher and contemplate the big questions. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to exist? Why am I on this planet? The big existential questions, which is why he's considered the father of exercise.
Either this or it's that,
Either or. But what I was really fascinated by was this is the place he used to walk. He used to set out in the morning and walk from here and stroll around the streets of Copenhagen. And the landlord of the Airbnb said that Kierkegaard used to visit this particular apartment. And so it was just a very moving moment to kind of feel the breath and feel the air of Kierkegaard.
Oh, that's marvelous. That's marvelous. Well, that's great. So are you taking all this experience and putting this into writing in some form?
There's constant writing and reflection, and a lot of it structurally is a new book that I'm working on to do with all the what I'm observing in the world today, and fostering the conditions for a new renaissance. So I'm intentionally going to places where I can explore different aspects of the rise and fall of civilization or philosophical insight like Kierkegaard. I just feel very strongly about this opportunity to create the conditions for a new renaissance. There's been two in 3,000 years. The classical Greek period with just a flourishing of art, architecture, literature, philosophy, and so forth, and the Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, who are still alive, so to speak, to us today.
Right.
And then the Renaissance in Italy and subsequently in Europe. As you've just mentioned, it just burst forth in Florence. Now, there's a number of things that contributed to that, but there's this bursting forth of a Renaissance, a renewal of this classical Greek period. And when we look at the impoverishment of the world today in terms of our failure to get on with one another, our failure to agree on the true and the good and the beautiful, a rebirth is in order. And the key to that is beauty. And so part of the research is searching out places of great beauty, experiencing that, so that we can take people to these places, to Athens, up to Norway, up the fjords, wherever it might be, do the train ride from Oslo to Bergen together and just bask in the beauty as we, climb the mountains in the train, and then, read the great texts of literature and reflect on what's happening. So I'm building a new business. Isn't quite, it's probably a business, but I'm just building this new thing for this next phase of my career to help us transition to a new renaissance.
It's more of an enterprise, isn't it?
It's
Cultural enterprise.
It's very much a socio-cultural kind of work to say, and we're just in desperate need of a new way of operating.
So let's make this a milestone marker in time today, what we're talking about. And I want to go back to when I was in college in the early 70s, and I took one philosophy course, and it was the philosophy of art.
Right.
And it was so disappointing because the professor focused the entire semester on what is good.
Yeah.
Not what is beautiful, not what is art, but what is good. And he was adamant that there's no such thing. And yeah, I mean, he was a nihilist, and he was very much
nihilism has nothing going for it.
No. And what was interesting is that his behavior and his dress belied his philosophy. So he was a fencer. He was a not a professional fencer, but a very, very adept amateur fencer. And he also dressed immaculately in sporting clothes.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot of money dressing to be a certain way, which told me that he believes that there is a good way to dress and a bad way to dress. And so for probably 10 years, I would have dreams about arguing with him about what is good and what is beautiful, because he was so hypocritical about it, you know. But he really wanted us not to believe that. And maybe he was a foil for the type of professor that challenges what your values are to such an extent that you end up giving up those. But what he really wanted you to do is to defend your values so that you become stronger. Maybe he was that way, but
maybe he was sparring.
well, he had that effect upon me,
Yeah.
and am I grateful for him? I'm not there yet, because I was disappointed that he couldn't see what was obvious to every one of us in the class, you know. And so, you know, and to compare him with another class I had, I don't think it was the same semester, but it was a class on the Romantic period of classical music. So we're listening to Mendelssohn and to Brahms and to Beethoven, and I mean, it was, and a little bit of Wagner. I mean, it was, and it was that bringing together of sound in a way that elevated the human spirit, and which is still present today.
I was in, and I won't be able to pronounce this, so I won't even try, but a very famous symphony hall in Hamburg. Very, very, very famous, but I'm by the River Elbe, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of it.
I know the orchestra. I know that building too.
Right. So earlier this year, and we had kind of last minute seats, so they were right in the top, and just coincidentally directly looking over the orchestra.
Yeah.
And I was just so struck hearing this beautiful music. But what I was really struck by was I could see the coordination of all the instruments in a way that you couldn't see through looking face on at them, you know, just the way the bows all move together and some of those kind of things. One moment that really, really struck me. There was a man at the back of the orchestra who sat for almost the entire piece. And there was this moment where he stood up and he reaches out his hands and picks up two cymbals from a rack, stands back, and he's watching. You can tell he's watching the conductor, just focused on the conductor. And she sends a signal that he would have discerned, and he goes, clang. And he's watching her, and she sends this signal, and he clangs the cymbals again, puts them back, and sits down.
Yeah.
That was his contribution to the music, but kind of what a wonderful contribution that, and I could just see in that moment the way they engaged together and the way these disparate individuals made something together that could not exist without all of them working in harmony in that kind of way. And that's what beauty is. Beauty, there's a harmony in the sunrise, there's a harmony in the mountains, there's a harmony that says, there's a harmony in reality that calls us. In the same way the music moves our heart and mind, and that beauty is waiting for all of us if only we look.
When we met first in 2017 in Vienna at the Peter Drucker Global Forum, I had been there a few days before the forum and had gone to see the Vienna orchestra, you know, symphony orchestra there at the Music Marine, and I was sitting upstairs parallel to the conductor, and I'll never forget this. So the first piece was played by this world famous cellist named Daniel Gautier, and they did Shostakovich's Cello Symphony, which is an incredibly complex, dissonant sort of thing, and he's playing this with such passion. It's really beautiful. And then it could not have been any better. They did Richard Strauss's Alpen Symphony, which is set right there in Vienna. And you know, you're looking at these mountains that surround the city of Vienna, and this is the Alpen Symphony's context. and you're thinking, I'm thinking, what a privilege it is to be where this was inspired. And during that time I was there, my friend John, who's Viennese, he lives there, he took me out into the Viennese woods.
Mm.
And so every time I listen to the Strauss family and all their different things, I think of that place. It was a place.
Mm.
It just wasn't a piece of music, wasn't just a recording, just wasn't something on a written notes on a piece of paper. It was a response, an interaction to the place where they lived. And and for that reason, Vienna will always be one of my favorite places in the world.
What a lovely story.
Yeah, and I'll probably listen to that symphony this afternoon now because of our kind of a recognition that beauty is not just an idea, but it's something that inhabits a place, but it also inhabits people.
Mm.
And watch the Vienna Symphony play that very wonderful, bombastic piece. With it, there's a part in the late part of the symphony where there's a storm, and they have this big piece of musical equipment it's got this I don't know what it is, but it's like a drum. It's not a drum that you beat on, but it's got this piece of fabric on it, and they whirl this fabric, and it creates the sound of wind.
Wow.
I'm watching that go on and thinking of the coordination of the leadership of the conductor, but the leadership of each of the sections of the orchestra. So I think as long as there's music to be heard, we'll have beauty in the world. And that's why I'm a subscriber to the Berlin Philharmonic's online channel.
Right.
I get to listen to whatever they have, so.
You're highlighting something that I missed in my education. I left school and went away to sea in the Merchant Marine.
Yeah.
And, the idea of listening to a symphony was not something one did. And if one happened to hear such music, it would sound discordant. It would sound, to an uneducated person who enjoyed, heavy metal, you would listen to that and think, what is going on? And so what you're highlighting that is very much lacking in our education. So you commented a couple of times in our conversation about doing the philosophy of art, about doing music, the kind of Western canon and so on, and how rich it would be if more of us had an education that exposed us to the true richness of culture.
Yeah.
Whether it's or architecture or literature or music or whatever, and not just in a polemical sense, but truly to kind of engage with it, to understand this is what the artist is saying, or the musician or the composer, and to be able to listen with the ears and look with the eyes that see and understand that lack of education does make it more difficult for us to truly appreciate what's out there, to be understood and appreciated.
And that's where our relationships come in, and we invite people into sharing the things that we love, and we have to learn how to articulate, why is this symphony, or why is that that painting something so significant? The British TV series Doctor Who, there is one episode, the season when David Tennant was Doctor Who,
right,
where they meet with Vincent van Gogh, and they travel they're in time, and he's painting, and he has no success in painting, and so they take him into the TARDIS, and they come to modern day Paris, and they go to the Musée d'Orsay, and they go up, and there's the gallery with all of his paintings, and he walks in, and he's looking around, and he's captivated by what has happened, and then there is a professor there, and I'm trying to remember who it is, and so David Tennant goes over and asks him, with Vincent standing just off to the side, tell me what you think of Van Gogh. And he says, he's probably the greatest painter of all time, because he was able to take his grief and the difficulty of his life and translate it into beauty. And Vincent looks at him, and he comes over and he grabs him and he hugs him. It's one of the greatest moments in television history, because it's connecting at that deep level that we all experience. I mean, it's obviously very important to me, because we all know people who have suffered for whatever reason, while they seek to be people of significance or people of impact or people of greatness, and they never achieve that. And yet they have a sort of beauty about who they are. And when you see someone appreciate who they are, then that becomes a work of art in and of itself, I think.
Where are we?
Paris, 2010 AD, and this is the mighty Musée d'Orsay, home to many of the greatest paintings in history.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Ignore that, I've got something more important to show you.
Take all your chances while you can. Never know when they'll pass you by. Like a sum the mathematician cannot solve. Like me, trying my hardest to explain. It's all about your crossing kisses, those first steps that I can't calculate.
Mr. Black? Yes. We met a few days ago. I asked you about the church at Vers.
Oh, yes. Glad to be of help. You were nice about my tie.
Yes. And today is another cracker, if I may say so. But I just wondered, between you and me, in 100 words, where do you think Van Gogh rates in the history of art?
Well, big question. But to me, Van Gogh is the finest painter of them all. Certainly the most popular great painter of all time. The most beloved. His command of color, the most magnificent. He transformed the pain of his tormented life into ecstatic beauty. Pain is easy to portray, but to use your passion and pain to portray the ecstasy and joy and magnificence of our world, no one had ever done it before. Perhaps no one ever will again. To my mind, that strange, wild man who roamed the fields of Provence was not only the world's greatest artist, but also one of the greatest men who ever lived.
Vincent, sorry. I'm sorry. Is it too much?
No. They are tears of joy. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Sorry about the beard.
It's all about your crossing kisses,
you're highlighting the fundamental aspect of being human, that we all want to care and be cared for. And when someone shows us understanding and sees the person inside of us, goes beyond the exterior, goes beyond they see that person inside us, and we resonate with that, and we respond to that. And I think suffering that does open us more and more to that. And one of the interesting things with suffering, among them, interesting is not a word that I would use that captures it at all. In suffering, you then have to become the receptor, the receiver of other people's care, and it forces you into that position.
Yes, it does.
And so suddenly you have people caring for you, and that for me has really been quite a profound thing to see, the way people have cared for me in my grief, and some out of their own grief, some out of their own suffering, so the sharing of the pain, others out of deep sense of love and care and concern. That's been a really very touching thing, which has just continues to reveal to me our humanity. That, and we see this in all manner of trauma and tragedy. You know, when there's something bad happens, whatever it is, people just, there's a thing in us that goes, I care, what can I do? And that's the kind of world we're trying to build, a more caring world. And I'm just really convinced the key to that is beauty. Return to higher order values, specifically and particularly beauty has the power to do that.
I think I will include the Doctor Who clip in our interview. I think it'll be important to some people.
I would love to see it. Yeah.
So here we are at the end of the year, and we got a new year coming. And I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but I'd like us to talk a little bit about how we can look at a new year coming in the light of all the crisis that's in the world, you know, the predictions of collapse, but also the need to recover a sense of beauty, a sense of creativity, our sense of humanity. So how should we look at 2024? What are your thoughts about how, as human beings, we venture into this new year and make it different than what we've seen in the past?
It's a big question, isn't it? Because once you've gone around the sun a few times, you realize that, you know, your New Year's resolutions often don't last beyond the expression of them, and you often then look back on them and grasp how either self-serving or irrelevant they were in the overall scheme of things. And then we're also aware, and it's become very evident to us in the last 5 years, you know, with the pandemic and some other kind of global crises, it's really become very, very evident that there's just a lot happening which is way beyond our control, way above our pay grade to resolve or to even bend the needle on in any way at all. Mm-hmm. So we're impacted by events way beyond our control that can significantly destabilize our world and our relationships. And so if we look into 2024, it would be a brave person to say, you know, all this is going to be behind us. All it tells us really is that entropy is normal. You know, I find it comical that my desk never tidies itself up. It always manages to get more untidy without any effort.
Yes.
But why doesn't it get tidy without any effort? Why doesn't my room tidy itself without any effort? Because it can untidy itself.
Yeah.
And so I kind of find it fascinating that without any effort at all, things break down, and this is really a very, very important point, I think, for 2024, without any effort at all, our relationships decay.
Yes.
Our lives fall apart. We get a little bit more lazy. We get a little bit more complacent. And so therefore, I think it's not really a thing for 2024. And this is why, to your point, it's not a New Year's resolution. It's kind of a way to live our life. I read a wonderful quote many years ago saying that our first work of art is our own life.
Mm.
And so what's that portrait? What's that landscape that you're drawing? You know, in what way are you writing your signature on the universe? This is a moment for saying, I'm not going to allow decay to creep into my life in even the little ways. I'm going to eat well, sleep well, exercise well. I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to look after my relationships. I'm going to look after the people I care for and the people who care for me. I'm going to look after my piece of the planet. I'm going to bring peace and harmony where I can bring peace and harmony. And I'm going to spend every day looking for beauty, whether it's beauty in the smile, whether it's beauty in the eyes of a colleague, whether it's beauty in the flower, whether it's beauty in the snowfall, wherever it is, there's beauty to be found. And then I'm going to ask, how can I enhance that beauty and help others see and appreciate that beauty? If we do that, we will resist entropy in our own lives, but we'll help others grow and become who they can be, and we'll build a better world.
Oh, I like that. I really like that, because it suggests that with the dawn comes a new day.
Absolutely.
New opportunity. With the new year, a new chapter in our lives, and we can start over, and we can start afresh, and we can start by sharing that with other people, and I think that's one of the keys too. I'm grateful for you, Anthony. Appreciate
Likewise.
the work that you're doing, the long-term effect that you're going to have upon the world, and the thought of a new renaissance just really appeals to me. And in fact, I've got to think about that. I'm going to think about that pretty seriously for the next couple of days, because I think you're saying something to us that we should pay attention to.
Thank you. Stay well.
So everyone, thank you for watching. I hope this has been beneficial to you. I may add some more things into. I may add a little clip of some music, from Hamburg, or maybe from Vienna, maybe a walkthrough of the square where Kierkegaard walked. I mean, all those things I think are places that we should honor, and so maybe I'll add that into this, and this become much longer, but a much more enriching experience. So thank you, Anthony, for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.
Thank you.